Hello, hello, hello. It's me, Michelle, your host and pocket DJ of Coffee Fueled Stories, a show where storytelling and coffee hang out. This week's special guest is Alessandro Martinez. Hello, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So, we are going to talk about several things today, and it's going to be very hard not to do spoilers. So, we'll talk about your book, Helminth. There's a few things about that without spoilers. And then volume 3 of Little Coffee Shop of Horrors, and your new spooky home. Congratulations on your new home, by the way.
Thank you.
So
It's
as you,
it is quite spooky.
yeah, as you were saying, you don't have any furniture in there right now.
Right. We got here last week and our movers still have not arrived. So I'm sitting on the floor right now.
I was wondering, are you sitting on boxes? But you're sitting on the floor. So we'll keep this moving along so you don't get cramps. Or if you need to move around and walk around, it's okay too. You'll take us on a tour.
Sure.
So let's talk about Helminth. So there's three things about that. Um, the book itself,
Mhm.
the title, I had to Google it because I didn't know what that was. So the definition I came up with was worm. Yes,
Yeah, a parasitic worm.
a parasitic worm. Yeah. So that was before I even started reading. And I was like, oh no, what are we getting into? So my questions are about that without spoilers is how long did it take you to write this story? And how did you come up with the idea for this story?
So the idea came to me, this might sound cliche, but in a dream. I dreamt of that I was walking through the woods and I came across a jar that had some nasty stuff in it. And that's all I remember from the dream. So it all sprang from that simple concept.
That's crazy. So, it's funny that you say that because in my notes I literally have screepy, screepy jar. Like that's what I wrote. I was like, "Bleh." I'm all, and then the gore factor, like it's really funny because I'm just reading along and I'm following the tale and everything is all peachy. And then all of a sudden, like it's just this gore fest. But not like it was very purposeful gore, if you will. It wasn't like just gratuitous gore, you know? And so was that something that you had to like really scale back on where you're kind of like, okay, this is over the top, or this is just the right amount of gore. This is exactly what I want them to think and feel.
um, yeah, I usually try not to do gore just for gore's sake. So since you read the book, everything leads to something
Yes.
without saying spoilers.
Yeah.
But I don't think I had to dial it back much. My publisher and editor, Kate Jones, she enjoyed most of it, so I don't think she really toned it down at all when we first went through the edits. But she really enjoyed the book, and so I was like, yeah, let's. I don't want to tone anything down, so but yeah, it does ramp up after some creepy ghostly things. It just jumps.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, I was just ooh, and then all of a sudden I was like, "Whoa," but in a good way, like in a really good way.
Yeah.
And like the character development was, like everything was very intentional and I really enjoyed that. And so that's one of the questions I have for you is because it is without, giving away spoilers. So I want to focus on the location, characters, and the ideas. So we already talked about that. But so like the location, why did you choose out of all of the places in the world, this particular setting? This what struck you about like the PNW?
um, I really enjoy creepy forests as settings, and I visited there a couple times before writing the book, and then afterward, and just just all the green and just the endless forest. I love that. And so I that's often a setting in my stories. Just not specifically Pacific Northwest, but just thick, dark forests. And it rains a lot there, so I love that too.
Yeah.
um, and so that's why I chose it because that's one of my favorite settings is just a forest that you get lost in, and who knows what's hiding behind the shadow of a tree.
Right,
And
right.
then the town Black Ashes, which plays a small role. They pass through it on their way to the lake house. I really enjoy making up my own towns. So I'll choose a specific state or something, but then I'll usually make up the town that. So that's usually how my stories go. Because I love naming things.
That's really cool. Now, so if you were to make a map of all of the places that you've created, like have you like thought about doing that? Like now that you've got this really cool, and you've even talked about like doing a writer's retreat in
Yeah,
your new home.
yeah, yeah. Once there's a couple more stories out there, maybe I'll start making a map. I do also write high fantasy, so I've drawn tons of maps for that world. Um, Super fun to do. Yeah, I do love doing that. So I'll probably do that at some point for my modern day stories.
Very cool. And talking about like map making, there's something really cool about having a map kind of like in the beginning of a book, right? Especially like fantasy.
Yeah,
Like that's
yeah,
that's kind of like the first thing that you want to do when you dive into a fantasy book is you're like, ooh, where are we going? What's going to happen? Ooh, I like the
right.
name of these places and things of that and things of that nature. And so this book, you also had you kind of had like you created a language, like you did a lot of it has a Lovecraftian vibe to it. And now was that intentional as well? So you just had this dream with this jar, and then did everything just kind of spawn from that dream?
Yeah, I'm a pantser, so I just came up with the idea. I usually make some notes as I think about the story, and then I I try to figure out where I want it to start, and then everything after that is just see what happens, see what the characters do, where they want to go. So yeah, I hardly ever outline anything.
Totally. So on that note, because you mentioned characters, so I wanted to ask you the four girls that you created, and usually so we just did like a whole bunch because it was Friday the 13th last week. We went and binged a bunch of horror movies, and we watched Evil Dead, the newer version, not the with Ash,
Right,
that
right.
series. So this was completely different. And so again, it was, a cabin in the wood, screepy forest. Um, and this had male and female characters. And so yours has the girls. And I wanted to know, was that intentional that you chose four female friends as opposed to like four people or five people that were like male and female? Like why what and I don't mean this like in a it's more of I'm really curious, like I really enjoyed the four girls that you created. And so I was wondering more of like, oh, why did he create, four girls as opposed to like male and female, friends and
Mhm.
or boyfriends, things of that nature. So was that also very conscious?
Yeah. Also on a side note, Evil Dead is a huge influence of mine. My one of my top, if not the top, horror franchises that I love. I actually not to go off on a tangent, but
We will do it. Do it.
I've been to Tennessee where the original cabin stood.
No.
It's on private property, so don't go on there. I've met Bruce Campbell. I've gotten his signature on DVDs. I have two rocks from Linda's grave from the second movie. I had him sign those.
No way.
Also, there was a Kickstarter a while ago that actually never. It was for a board game, Evil Dead board game. It never happened, but I did get two dice from it carved from wood of the cabin.
No.
So I'm a huge Evil Dead fan.
Because it's awesome. It's so awesome. Oh my God, that movie. It's, and I saw it with my parents, and we had a cabin. And so we like we would look at each other before we would all go in, and we're like, nobody open the book.
So yeah, there's a big influence, especially on this book. If you can't, if you couldn't tell.
And so
Um,
yes, and I was like, oh, I'm so glad I watched that before reading your book.
so yeah, so for the four women, so I grew up. My household growing up was my mom, my aunt, and my grandma, and my grandma and grandpa. So I was surrounded by strong women. My grandma, if I go on another tangent here, she's 98 now. She grew up in Mexico, the second youngest of 11 kids, and almost all of them, I think, except for one, all the rest grew up to be either teachers or like professors and scientists and doctors. Um, so she became a dentist in Mexico, and then moved here later in life, and had a they at that time, which was hard for women to be in those fields. Not only that, but coming to the U.S., they didn't accept any of her credentials, so she had to do all of that again. But
Ay,
she did. She did that, and she started working for the L.A. County prison system. So she worked in the prison with the male prisoners. So she was a very, very strong woman. And
wow.
then eventually she opened her own office at a part of a retirement home, and she worked there until she was about in her 70s.
Wow. Wow.
So yeah, so I grew up with women, um, and yeah, I wanted four women, so their group dynamic would be really tight friends. I know, obviously men can be friends, but I thought, this would you can sort of share more. There's certain bonds that happen uh, with different dynamics. So I really wanted like a super tight bond with all four of them. Um, and my wife, she's my unofficial editor, so she helped me also with how women would think and how their friendships are. Because I had a pretty good idea, but there's always you can always use more help.
Yeah, yeah. And your dedication. So the dedication, you said exactly that to the strong women in your
Right,
life. And it was your
right.
wife, your daughter, and your grandmother, if I remember correctly. Yes?
My wife, my aunt, my mom, and my grandma.
Yes. Yeah. And I was like, oh, again, so you kind of gave us these little, threads. And another thing, by the way, okay, one thing I love is nerding out and talking with authors about their creations. And you, sir, gave me two things that I literally had to go and look up because I did not know what a psychopomp was. And I had to go
Okay.
look up the name of your
Mhm.
book. And so again, I had all of these I literally was like, we are going to have a lot of fun because I literally had to go, I went down little rabbit holes of nuggets of information. And I was like, oh my God, this is so cool because you were very conscious about everything that you did. And then you just let it flow. And so, like I said,
Mhm.
going along with the story, okay, okay. And then all of a sudden, blah. And then, and again, with the breadcrumbs, so I was like, this is truly, I love to be able to chew on a book, and this gave me lots of things to chew on, if you will. Pun intended there.
Glad.
But yeah, so psychopomps, is that, you know, again, was there something that you were like, I need to stick this in a book, or this is an idea that I came up with, and I want to put this in, like, I had no idea that's a term. So listeners, I apologize. A psychopomp, if you would, Alessandro, would you like to describe a psychopomp, please?
So a cyclopomp is, I believe the word is sort of Greek in origin,
Yes.
but yeah, back in mythology and then also folklore, it's something that helps spirits travel to the afterlife.
Yes.
So in Helmeth, they talk about how the folklore of the region, it's these little wagtail birds. Um, which that particular wagtail is a real bird, but the
Yes.
species in the book I made up. So
Yeah, and because I did, I Googled wagtail as well. I was like, and that's why I was like, seriously, Alessandro, what is happening right? I just kept taking notes and Googling and taking notes and Googling. I was like, I'm getting so distracted. I felt like it wasn't quite grad school, but that's what I loved about like reading some of the books that we had. I was like, oh, what is that? And then, again, rabbit hole, wormhole, rabbit hole. So, uh, what also reminded me is my family is from Argentina and hummingbirds, my grandmother's favorite bird was a hummingbird. And I didn't know that they call them colibris. And so from my mom, I learned from my mom that my grandmother loved these birds because I didn't know that while she was alive. And so, and magical realism, I love magical realism. And so knowing like the history of like magical realism and hummingbirds. And so I'm like, oh my God, I was like, hummingbird, my grandmother, psychopomps, like this. Again, I was just like having all of these, I was getting so excited about learning all of this new stuff. So I'm like, no matter how many books I've read, no matter how much information, you can still learn something new from
right,
books. And thank you for
exactly.
that. Thank you. And this is
um,
this is banned books week. As a matter of fact, I'm using my banned book mug right now. So I would love if at some point in time in the show, I would love you to say like I love reading banned books or something like that. So we'll do that because I want to like promote banned books all this week. So if you don't mind,
of course,
do you read banned books?
I read. Sure, I mean, I'll read anything.
Right?
If it's a subject that I want to read, I don't care what other people think. I'll get it and read it.
Right? And I don't understand like what is so wrong with some of the like Animal Farm? Animal Farm is like, and George Orwell. So the number one, I learned this just yesterday. Again, so learning, apparently yesterday I spent a lot of time learning. 54 and I'm still learning. The number one banned book is 1984 by George Orwell. Are you kidding me?
Ironic.
It's an amazing book. And Fahrenheit 451. Like those are like my two favorite books.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, but
It is. Yeah, we could probably spend an hour talking about that. So let's get back into your book and
sure.
your character and your stories. So, now, Little Coffee Shop of Horrors. For the listeners who don't know, I've actually had Paul on the show a couple of times, Paul Cairo, and his nephew Joe as well. They were on the show to talk about Volume 2. And so now you are part of Volume 3. And
Right.
so, would you like to tell the listeners how Little Coffee Shop of Horrors work?
Sure. So yeah, Paul and his nephew, they wrote the first two collections, only one and two, um, which they then wanted to turn. They wanted to make it into an anthology, which you need at least three authors for. And so I was lucky enough that Paul likes my work, and so he invited me along. So it's a really cool concept. It's called the coffee shop, Little Coffee Shop of Horrors, because for every story, you go to a coffee shop and then something there you take inspiration from and turn that into the story. So you go to whatever coffee shop you want. There's a little blurb before the story that talks about where you went and what exactly inspired you. So I thought it was a really cool idea. So, and I was super happy that they invited me. So, yeah,
That's awesome. When does it come out? It's usually in October. So is that like
yeah. He said he doesn't. We don't have an exact date yet, but in the fall, yeah. So soon.
very cool? Can't wait for that. I'm super excited for that. Can you tell us anything about that story without giving anything away, or is that like under wraps until it gets released?
I can tell you that the title is called "Hymn of the Brine." So something to do with the ocean
Very
and
cool.
hymns. So music.
Very cool. I love it. I'm excited. Like I said, I when I first came across that concept, I was just like, oh my gosh, this is absolutely brilliant. And book book one is my ebook, and book two I actually have behind me. You can't see it, but it's behind me. So I look forward to volume three. That's going to be awesome.
Ooh,
And then, so now you were in LA. You were a member of the Horror
yes.
Writers Association LA chapter, and now you are in Ohio. So was that, are you originally from Ohio? How did you end up in this really groovy, cool, spooky house?
So I was born and raised in Southern California. I've traveled a lot, but I've never lived anywhere else. My wife is originally from Ohio, um, so this is not her hometown, but she's from Ohio. So we've been looking around because we were planning to move out of California for a while now. So the past couple of years, we've been traveling the U.S., just checking out states, see what there's lots of pretty areas around where we want to go, where is a cheaper cost of living than than the LA area. Um, and so, yeah, we were in Kentucky for our last trip, and I was on this website that lists like old houses and stuff, old buildings. I was like, oh, this one's in Ohio. It's only 3 hours from where we are right now, and it looks really cool. We should go check it out. And so we drove here and just instantly fell in love with the house because it looks awesome.
Yeah, it
Looks
has
like a
a,
big castle.
yeah, and it kind of gives me like a little bit of like American Horror Story vibes, but not quite. Like a little bit, but not quite. Like it's
You're not the
probably the
first person who
stone.
said that.
It's all of the stone. Like it's made from, it's not, brick. It has that
Right.
stone feel, well, look to it. And so, yeah, I was like, the second I saw it, I was like, ooh, American Horror Story. How cool is that?
Yeah. So yeah, we it was pretty quick. We were not planning to move this soon. But the house was for sale. We didn't want anyone else to snatch it up, so we bought it. Um,
Nice.
sold our house in California, which was for a ridiculous amount for a one bedroom, one bathroom house. And we were able to afford this 8 bedroom house.
Wow, that's crazy.
So
Now, is there a story behind that house? Is that like, is that something like, if there is a story, is it something that you can share, or are you like sitting on that?
I haven't found I've looked into history. I haven't found really anything yet. So I might have to maybe I'll have to create one. But it was built in 1908 by a lumber baron called Joseph Murphy. But nothing that I've found yet, nothing of note occurred in the house. But there might be something hidden that we
Very,
find.
yeah, right? Like that sounds amazing. Like I said, I'm super excited. I can't wait to see what happens. Like when you said, the second you said something about a writer's retreat, I was like, oh my God. I was like, that's gonna be so cool. Like, and especially just like the look of it. It just has that some feel to it. So I'm super excited for you guys on that. So
Yeah,
um
we're really excited. It's a small town, which I'm gonna have to get used to. It's a pretty small town, big adjustment there. But we do hope we already have people like plumbers, electricians coming in and stuff. We hope to get the house, well, first furnished since our movers to get here, and then there's like tons of antique stores around here. So hopefully we get cheap, cool looking furniture. And then yeah, we want to open it up eventually for writers retreats. I know a bunch of horror writers would probably like to stay in this house. Um, cool furniture. There's a freaking ballroom on the third floor.
that is so
Um,
cool.
yeah, and yeah, horror, like writers retreats, workshops, maybe. Maybe more than just writers retreats. Maybe we'll host. I don't know. Like someone suggested haunted doll collector workshop or something.
Oh yeah, you could do all kinds of stuff. Oh my God, that's so awesome. So I look forward to seeing what you guys end up creating and putting on, so to speak. So that's really cool. I wanted to ask you, actually, this is kind of a story. Um, Part of it is a question and part of it is a story. So again, without giving away any spoilers, so I'm not going to give away any spoilers, but there's a scene that I think it's safe to talk about. Um, the elevator scene with the facing backward. Um, so that's all I'm going to say about that scene without going into detail. But the second I read that scene, I immediately thought about an experiment, a sociology experiment. When I was going back to school, I took a sociology class, and she gave us assignments, and we had to go and do something in public that would
Mhm.
kind of unsettle people and
Mhm.
write about it. And so we had to pick three things to do, and I chose to ride in an elevator backward, if you will.
Facing
And
everyone.
yeah, and it was the creepiest, weirdest experience and thing. And so when I was reading the scene, I had to kind of remove myself from my experience, so that I could enjoy the scene. But I wanted to ask you, have you ever done that? Have you ever ridden in an elevator backwards?
I've heard of that little social experiment before, but I have not. I don't have the courage to do that, so I have not done that yet.
And again, the only reason I did it is because I had to write about it. We had to,
Right.
so the other, I can't remember what the third thing that was, but one was ride an elevator backwards. The other was go into a store and just stand like, so like I went to, I think it was Macy's. I went into a Macy's shoe department, and I just stood there next to some shoes. And we just had to stand there. You couldn't look at your watch, you couldn't like look, you just literally had to go into a section in a store and just stand next to something and see how people reacted to you just standing there. And again, like I'm like, oh my God, I remember being so nervous. I'm like, all of a sudden the memories are coming back. I'm like, oh, and then like, security is coming over. Can I help you? And I'm like, sir, you're messing with my social experiment for school. And he was like, what? And I was like, I have to stand here and just kind of make people uncomfortable. So so yeah, riding backwards in an elevator makes people very uncomfortable.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I don't recommend it. So, like I said, I'm super excited to see what happens with all of your house stories and things of that nature. So I'm super excited for that. But before I forget, one last question regarding your book, and that you have, I didn't mark the page because it's kind of hard on Kindle, so it's just a quote, and I wanted to ask you about this because this kind of struck me. You have grief is the most powerful emotion a person could experience. And then you said, in my opinion. And I agree with you on that. And I wanted to ask you, because you do tap into grief and into sadness and into loss through your characters. And so I was curious to know if that was from personal experience or if that's from, experiences or reading. So that just kind of struck me as a really good talking point. So I wanted to ask you, how did you come upon that statement?
Um, I've lost one major person in my life, my grandpa, who was my father figure. Um, that was a year or two after I graduated high school. He passed away. Um, but other than that, I have not like lost lots of people in my life. Losing my grandpa was huge to me. Um, so yeah, I drew from that, and then just throughout my life, reading, watching things, talking to people, listening to stories. I've gathered. That's what I've gathered. That grief is just hits hardest.
Uh, Yes. So, first off, I'm sorry for your loss. And yes, I agree. Like, I always say, grief is a fucking bitch. Like, it's the worst. Like, there's sadness, like, out of all of the feelings to have, there's sadness, there's anger, there's happiness, but grief is literally a culmination of all these things all at one time, and it's just chaos. It's an emotional, chaotic mess. And so I thought that was really poignant to have that, like again in the beginning. So you set everything up just so. And then it was nominated for a Bram Stoker. It was Bram Stoker nominated, yes?
Yeah, in the first novel category. Yeah.
And so now have you had multiple nominations, Bram Stoker nominations?
Nope, that was the only
That
one so
was,
far.
this is the first one. So congratulations on that, by the way.
Thank
Like
you.
that's freaking huge. So
It is. So I was super surprised that it was even nominated.
that's really cool. So having that under your belt now, is that something that you're kind of like, oh, I hope my like next books can, match up to that. Like is that kind of, is it like I don't want to say like is it good or is it bad, or because it's good, right? I mean, it's freaking awesome, but does that mess with you mentally, if is where I'm going with that?
Um, I don't think it has. I mean, it would be amazing if everything I write was nominated. But I'm not trying to like live up to something. I'm not writing just to like try to, go for an award or something. I truly just write like things that I want to write and love. Um, I have tons of other books, and there's a book that I wrote before. I think Helmuth was the second novel I ever wrote. So the first novel, which is it's a high fantasy novel, I'm still I've been shopping that around still, trying to find that at home. Um, but yeah, I'm not trying to write just like, oh, hope this like I'm not making a Oscar bait movie or something.
Nice.
I just want to write what I want.
That's awesome. That's awesome. It's and the writing process is so let's tell us about your writing process. Like, do you sit down daily and say, okay, I'm going to write 1,000 words today? Like, walk us through your writing process. And well, first off, did you always know you wanted to be a writer? Let's start with that question.
Not at all. No. um, yeah, I mean, I started reading at a very young age, and of course, horror stuff. Uh, from like when I was even young, I started with Goosebumps and then also Stephen King. So, stuff that I didn't understand when I was little, that I understand more now. So lots of stuff went over my head. But yeah, I started reading at a young age. And my birthday's November 1st, so the day after Halloween. So my mom always did like Halloween birthday parties, and I've always loved spooky stuff. And I would watch, scary movies with my grandpa all the time. I would watch, yeah, he would take me to the video store, rent movies, like, oh, rent whatever you want. And then I would just look at the covers. I had no idea what I'm renting. It's like some R-rated horror movies, like, oh, this one's called The Mangler. Let's watch it. Um, I think the earliest memory, I think I was like five, I want to say five or six, and I watched Child's Play, and I had nightmares, but I went back and rented more horror movies. um,
Instead
I see
of
you laughing.
deterring you, instead of deterring you, you were like, oh, I'll
Yeah,
go back for some more. Let's go for some more, Dad.
I had so many nightmares and staying up late in the darkness in my room. But apparently, I don't know. I loved it, so I
Oh
went
my
back for
gosh.
more.
That's
So yeah, I
awesome.
watched and read a ton of horror stuff. Um, I'm sorry, what was the question?
It,
I went
did
off.
you? No, no. It
Oh,
was.
did I
Did
always
you?
want to know if I wanted to be a writer?
Yeah.
So I always enjoyed that stuff, reading. I read a ton, and then watching, obviously, and then video games too. I played tons of video games, even when I was little. I gravitated towards the horror stuff. And then I did, as I got older, I did some fiction writing here and there, just for myself, or maybe like an assignment for English or something. Um, and then it wasn't actually until I met my wife in 2014 that I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I had taken some college classes. I tried psychology. I tried sign language interpreting. I even did massage therapy for a while. I was like, this is all fine, but it's not something I would like wanted to do. And then she knew that I had written some here and there. She's like, well, if you want to do that for as a career, she's a lawyer, so I was like, just do it. If you want to do it, just go ahead and do it. And so I sat down and wrote a story and submitted it. Obviously, got a lot of rejections, but it eventually got picked up by a publisher, Dead Man's Tome, and that was my first sale. And so I just kept writing short stories after that, then started writing novels. So yeah, since 2014 is when I started professionally writing.
And is that when you
So
found
not always knew that I wanted to be a writer.
uh, did you, so because you started writing late, so to speak, did you find the Horror Writers Association? Like, was that kind of part of that process as you were learning and writing, going through it?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, like I had written some stuff before. I'd written okay, I'd written one piece of fan fiction, and that it was Star Wars fan fiction. And actually, it was for a website called the Dark Brotherhood. Very old website that's probably not around anymore. But it won an award on there.
Well,
But anyway, um, but yeah, I wasn't serious about it. It was just a hobby. And then once my future wife, encouraged me to write, I started researching a bunch. Like, oh, I should connect and network. And yeah, the Horror Writers Association was one of the first things. And I think after the first sale, I joined pretty quickly.
very cool. So, and then the I lost the second question, so that's my mistake. So I know we were talking about writing books and things of that nature.
My
So
process or something.
yes, your writing process. So now that we know when you started, 2014, what is your writing process like now that you've got a couple of stories under your belt? Like, what is your writing process on a daily basis or weekly basis?
So I actually haven't written a lot in the past 2 months because we've been moving.
Yeah.
But I try to, yeah, I sit down at least every weekday, sometimes on the weekends too. I get up, have breakfast, then start writing at 9. I take a lunch break, besides that, I write until about 4:30 or so. So yeah, I sit down just every day, try to write because I'm I want to make it a career. So you can't just do it whenever the mood strikes. You have to be disciplined and sit yourself down. So yeah, I do write every day around 9 to 4:30.
So you write it as if it was a job. So you approach it so like 9 to 5, if you will. So and so that's awesome because I've always wondered, how like and what process works, for everybody is different. And but you're absolutely right. Like if you want to, you can't just willy-nilly you approach it, so I applaud your effort. So now I'm thinking, oh, maybe I should probably set aside like specific time because I've got a story right here that's in front of me that I don't think I've touched for a couple of months, maybe longer. So um it's
I mean,
talking to
it's difficult at first.
yeah,
Sorry.
no, please. And so you have to discipline yourself to do it.
Right. And yeah, I mean, if you're like for the people out there, if you're just doing it as a hobby, then obviously you don't have to sit down nine 9 to 4:30. But I think if you want to be like it's my job, might not be making a ton of money, but it's my job, so I need to be disciplined about it and make sure I work it like a job. Um, but yeah, in the beginning, it's going to be super difficult because I think most people starting out are used to just like, oh, I'm in the mood right now, so I'll start typing and then whatever. But also when that amount that I'm sitting at the computer, it's not all just writing. I mean, there's also editing, but a lot of it is research, and then going down rabbit holes. Some of them, which take up hours for like, oh, trying to write this one sentence, but you want to get it factually correct, so you spend like 2 hours going down rabbit holes. So that takes up some time too. But yeah, so I mean, you get a lot done.
To totally. And I think that's like the hardest part as well, even reading. So like with your book, like I said, I would start reading and then I would find myself distracted. And
Mhm.
I've learned that I need to put my do not disturb on so that I don't get distracted. So because I read on my computer, but I have my phone next to me on this little stand here, and you see it light up in the, peripheral vision, and I'm like, oh, who's responding to my Instagram post, blah blah blah. So I need to make sure that I don't do that because I need to focus on the story. So this is the final question for regarding your book. And then, so it's technically the penultimate question, but it's the final question for your book. And then it's going to be the final question for the show coming up. So you mentioned food. You've got lots of food in there. So I wanted to talk about food because I love talking about food with authors. So you have sushi. Now this is not all in the same scene, listeners. This is throughout the book. You have sushi, sausages, waffles, turkey sandwiches, jelly beans, skirt steak. You have s'mores. You have lots of food in there. Your girls eat. So can I just say thank you for not giving them salad and like not stock health like protein shakes and things like that. Like, your girls ate. So thank you for that.
They need the energy to run around in horror.
Right? Right? So is skirt steak your favorite steak?
Um, it's pretty good.
Right?
I don't know if it's my favorite. I don't know. I'd have to think about my favorite steak, but I love steaks. Just
Totally.
give me a big chunk of beef.
Oh yes, absolutely, absolutely. And you also mentioned coffee a couple of times, so thank you for that. That made me very happy. So now this is the final question is what is your preferred writing beverage? Are you a coffee drinker, tea drinker? Do you drink mate? Like, what is your preferred writing beverage and how much do you drink in a day of that?
I'm afraid I'm gonna be very boring here. I just drink water.
Well, at least just stay hydrated. Your kidneys love you.
Like I see like all the social media stuff and like people, I don't know if I'm a writer because like I don't have a cat, I have a dog. I don't drink alcohol or coffee or tea. It's like, and that's what I see like everyone else doing. Um, I do like coffee ice cream though.
Okay, coffee ice cream is really good. Okay, so you'll appreciate this. So, when I was, and there's nothing wrong with that. At least, again, water is it's vital to our existence. So kudos to you on that. So growing up, so I mentioned my family is Argentinian, and I went vegetarian there for a while, and I thought they were going to disown me because, as you know, beef is a major factor in the Argentinian diet.
Right.
And I seriously, and I don't drink wine. And so I would show up to the family barbecues, and it was always this like, what kind of Argentinian are you? Like, where did you come from? Why are you here? Like, and I'm like, this is my family. Like, my family just hates me. I'm like, oh no, I feel like I'm disappointing my blood. But then I switched, teenagers, you go through phases, things of that nature. And so, because I grew up on eating meat. And so they were like, why are you not eating meat? Like, you grew up on the best meat on the planet. But wine, I'm still not a fan of wine. So I too feel you in that regard. Now I do eat meat. I'm very much, I drink coffee. My grandmother drank a lot of mate. She would do her afternoon mate in the gourd with the bombilla and all of that. So I know like my family's culture, and they've accepted me again because I eat meat now, and they cut me slack on the wine because I can appreciate it. I just don't drink it. So I too feel like you. I'm like, I don't write. I don't drink out like alcohol is just not my thing. And I only drink a little bit of coffee now. You know, I'm not in my 20s anymore. I don't drink a pot of coffee like I did in my 20s. So you know, it's I don't like you it's not imposter syndrome, but you're just like, uh I'm not I'm not this type of writer. So I love that
Right.
you're a water writer. Like I said, I wish I could drink water. I wish I could drink water. I admire that you drink water. Like, why do you like water so much? I want to like water.
Well, I just, yeah, I didn't grow up like drinking coffee. I don't know. I don't know why. Like my family uh, drinks alcohol, and my sister is, she works at, she studied viticulture and works at a winery, but I don't drink. Who knows? I don't know. I'm weird.
No, it's preference. It's everybody's preference. So do you drink ice water or do you drink like room temperature water? Is it
Uh,
bubbly water or is it still water?
just regular water out of the fridge, chilled.
At least you didn't say tap water, because tap water can be kind of depend, especially like depending on where you live. Like tap water can be kind of
Yeah,
scary.
which
So
I'm drinking right now actually because house and no furniture.
totally, but again, water is vital, and they always say water is important because you need it to make coffee. So you know, there's those memes and things like that. But on the final note, I wanted to say thank you so much for hanging out and talking about your books and your stories. And again,
So
congratulations
much
on your
for
new
having
home.
me.
So, do you have any things coming up that you would like to let us know about?
Yes. So Helmets was my first novel. My second novel will be coming out next year. It is the beginning of a series called Enigmata, sort of a X-Files-ish, cases with, monster of the week, monster or first object or place of the week. So yeah, follow um, cases where they investigate enigmata, which are creatures or places or objects with supernatural properties. So that is the first book of at least three books coming out. And then also next year, I have a novella coming out. So the series will be coming out with Falstaff Dread, and then I have a novella coming out with Winding Road Stories, which will be a horror novella. So those two are coming out next year.
Awesome. And where is the best place for listeners to find you?
You can find me at my website, which is salessandromartinez.com.
Awesome. I will add those to the show notes so they can find you.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you. And then on the final, absolute final note, if you would please say my tagline of go forth and be magical.
Go forth and be magical.